let's prevent and treat diseases of aging by keeping the body younger.
Okay.
And the only way I know how to keep somebody alive for longer is to keep their diseases away.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out if you're not sick and you're not depressed and you got family, you don't want to die and you don't die. So that's my goal, is to keep everybody happy, healthy, productive. When that happens, you live longer.
Yeah, there's very few people. It's funny, of all the stuff in the medical world right now, there's this little community, right? Even to this day, you're one of very few people who are really spending their life studying this topic. It's fascinating. You would think that preventative medicine, preventative health, in other words, being proactive instead of treating disease, instead of preventing it, would be what everybody would be into now. But it's really still the way it was 80, 100 years ago. We just treat symptoms still, don't we?
Well, doctors do. Trained doctors do. That's where it's come out of history, where you have to wait for somebody to be sick to be able to diagnose and then treat.
Yeah.
But we live in a world now where we can predict diseases,
right,
in a way that people 100 years ago could never do that.
Yeah.
And so it's very rapidly changing, not so much at the edge of medicine, but in the consumer health and wellness and people's education of how to live their lives. And then they go to their doctor and say, hey, have you heard about this? Or, hey, have you seen my latest blood work that I had done myself?
It's so true.
And that the patient is now driving the doctor for the most part.
It is so true. I mean, that's exactly what I do. And I'm there's little markers and whatnot. The hormesis thing, I want to stay on that in a minute. So is intermittent fasting one of those things? In other words, you've tricked your body into thinking you're hungry. So that is a form of survival mode in your body?
Yeah, it is. It is. Time-restricted feeding is a better way of putting it.
Okay. Why? What's the difference?
Well, intermittent. So fasting is typically longer than a day. It can go for a couple of days, 3 days. I don't do that. I find that too draining on me.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is restrict the time that I eat, and I put that down to a few hours a day. So it's, if I can help it, one meal a day, one big meal.
Do you really?
Yeah, I try to do that. And I've lost a lot of weight. I have a lot better blood biochemistry. My predicted age is younger than it was. You've noticed that I look different. And that, I think, is partly due to the change in diet, and not just what I eat, which I've changed, but I also changed when I ate and eat. And that's once a day.
Is there a particular time every day for you? Is there?
Yes, dinner. I have a pretty big dinner because I've got to make up for all those calories.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that the not snacking and not having this bloated feeling after a meal is just wonderful. So I study myself. I'm a guinea pig, and I can measure my blood levels through these continuous glucose monitors. Have you tried one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just finished with one, as a matter of fact.
Do you find it useful?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You
I went to the Human Longevity Center, and they had me do that. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, there are some doctors that are against it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I tweeted out that it's like saying you're against weighing yourself on scales in the bathroom. You should be allowed to measure your body. But why would you do that? Well, I did that so I could learn what this fasting, or what I call time-restricted feeding, is doing to me. And I learned that once I did it for 3-4 weeks, my liver kicked in. My liver woke up and went, oh, I better make some sugar. And it's called gluconeogenesis.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes 3 weeks on average, and you'll feel hungry for 3 weeks. And if you want to get through that, then it's a wonderful state. I'm now at a state where I don't feel hungry through most of the day. Usually if I snack on something, it's a bit of chocolate or some nuts because I'm a bit stressed. But I love eating now more than I ever did.
Yeah.
And I can have big meals. It's only one a day.
But you can go for it.
I can go for it. I've gone from 100, I'm not a big guy, but I've gone from 150 pounds pre-COVID down to 133.
Yeah, you're thinner than the last time you were with me, and you look younger than the last time you were with me, like noticeably. I'm curious, though, like, you're drinking coffee right now. I know you've drank tequila because we've drinking it together. So you do still indulge in things that most people would tell you alcohol's not very healthy for you. So you still live your life, and you can still live a long life and still enjoy it, I guess, because I'm watching you do it, the 2 times we've been together.
That's true. The key is moderation. I don't have to be religious about it, or strictly religious. I think it's okay to have a drink once in a while. Don't overdo it. Don't fry your brain. Coffee, no harm in that. Plenty of goodness in that. Usually I'd have a matcha tea or something these days because there's some extra chemicals. But, in general, it's okay to eat a piece of cake once in a while. That's not going to hurt you. But if you eat a piece of cake every other day or every day, it'll mount up.
Yeah, the thing that's fascinating to me is this topic that we're talking about. It's the number one topic amongst me, my friends, even stuff I see on social, is this idea of living longer and living healthier. Yet today's show will explode. I already know this when I'm having you on because there's so little real true information about this stuff. And so you're talking about like what you put in your body. Well, I put a lot of steak in my body, and I've heard you talk about this, right? So what is What's an mTOR level? So I read these things, and they could be higher. They could be mTOR levels. I just read stuff, and then I remember them my way. So, what about eating meat? And what's an mTOR level? Am I pronouncing that wrong? You can correct me, but I know that it's important because it's stuff that I heard you talk about before.
Yeah, you're pronouncing it correctly. It's called mTOR.
Okay.
M stands for mammalian.
Okay.
And TOR is target of rapamycin, a drug that extends lifespan, and
Okay.
it does so by turning down mTOR.
Got it.
Okay, so mTOR is a protein, or a bunch of proteins that come together in the body, and the role in every cell is to sense how many amino acids are coming in. And it doesn't measure all 20 amino acids that are in the body. It just senses 3 main ones: leucine, isoleucine, valine, branched chain amino acids. You'll find them in abundance in meat and some protein shakes for weightlifting, right?
Okay.
And what it's doing is saying to the cell, all right, I got lots of protein. Let's put on some muscle. Let's grow.
Yes.
Reproduce. That's the abundant state. Okay. So you'll feel great in the short run.
Okay.
And you'll feel great. You might look great. But for the long run, your body's not putting yourself in this hormesis adversity state.
Got it.
Which is good for long-term health.
Okay.
So what I'm experimenting with my body all the time and measuring stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm optimizing. And I'm currently on a plant-based diet. Now, I really don't like giving up meat. I'm a carnivore. I'm a hedonist. I like alcohol and I like meat.
This is good.
I would love it if alcohol and meat were the healthiest foods.
They
in the
made us
world.
live to 200, right?
Really, but I'm a scientist, and I also I believe in data, not just what I think should be right. And often I think too many people just justify, I like meat, so it must be good for me.
Right.
So I'm currently testing the effects. So far, really great effects on my body from this plant-based diet. But if I had a fish put in front of me and I was socializing, or even a steak, on occasion I'll have it. It's not going to hurt me. But am I going to eat steak every night? No way.
Okay.
I don't think the science backs that up to be long-term healthy. Am I going to make it to 100 by eating steak every night? I'd say it's quite doubtful.
Okay.
Unless you've got really good parents and genes, which I don't, by the way.
Neither do I.
So I have to work a little harder.
Yeah.
That's
right. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
So the steak thing is no. So this overall, like a lot of people that listen to my show, all different sorts, but there is a segment that really train hard. They lift weights. They're actively very physical. So I'm wondering 2 things that we've covered so far, just so I can ask for them, because I'm hearing them say this. One, on the idea that what I'm calling intermittent fasting, which you're calling having these smaller feeding windows. Would you still recommend that for someone who's putting themselves under really strenuous exercise? I'm talking, an hour, 90 minutes a day of strenuous exercise, number 1. Number 2, can you get enough protein to sustain that sort of muscle tear down and rebuilding without eating meat, particularly steak and even, some sorts of chicken? What are your thoughts on those 2 things?
right. Well, many people have seen the documentary Game Changers.
Yes, I've seen it. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. Well, you just have to eat a lot more of plants, tons of spinach, a lot, right, to make up for it.
A lot.
It's really quite a lot.
Yeah.
Or you can take some protein. But what's different about plants is they have a different ratio of amino acids that shuts down the mTOR and then protects the body.
Got it.
And what mTOR is doing that's beneficial is mainly what it does is recycles old protein. And as we get older, we build up all this old crappy protein that's oxidized and misfolded. It causes Alzheimer's, but it's causing all sorts of diseases. And mTOR, when it senses there's not enough amino acid supply, it'll start recycling your old proteins first, not the young ones. And then that turnover is what fasting is all about.
Okay.
And if you're eating a lot of meat, you won't turn over the old protein. And that'll build up and build up and build up. So I think probably what we'll find the optimum is, and if you allow me to speculate as a scientist, is that it's all about variety. And even if you're a steak lover or 3 meals a day plus snacks and you want to build up your body, you'll still benefit from some periods during the week or during the month of skipping meals and putting your body in a state where it does recycle those proteins and get mTOR to shut down. Because if mTOR is on all the time, we know this in animals, they live short. It's like live fast, die young.
Okay.
They look great, but they die young. And I'm all about having a long, healthy life.
I know you are, yeah.
But I think weightlifting is really important. I do it myself, not as much as I should for lack of time, but the benefits there are huge on male hormones, women as well.
Okay.
You don't just look good, you feel good, you have bounce in your step.
Yeah.
So I'm all for that. A bit of aerobics as well, of course, is essential as well to get your body into what's called the hypoxic, low oxygen state.
Yes.
And that will trigger the same defenses that we're talking about as fasting. And this is the theme, Ed, is that this hormesis effect it can be triggered in many different ways through the same mechanisms. One is lack of these amino acids. The other is, I just mentioned, exercise and low oxygen. But you can also do a cold plunge. You can do a sauna. There's even hyperbaric oxygen chambers. Have you heard of these?
Of course.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Big thing in California here.
It is.
Not so much in Massachusetts, but what we're doing is putting the body out of its normal healthy state for a little bit to see. You know, when you weightlift, you're tearing muscle.
Right. That's why I was hoping you were going to tell me that physical, strenuous training like that is in fact putting your body in that survival hormesis type state.
100%.
Okay.
And there's a type of hormesis that's particularly beneficial, which I don't talk about much, so it's good to share it here.
Yeah.
It's called mitohormesis.
Okay.
So, mitochondria, the power packs of the cell, they're little ancient bacteria that swim in our cells, and they can multiply, and we want more of them to be healthy. And as we get older, we have less and less of them, and they're not very active. Now, one way to trigger their activity to make them younger and more abundant is to give them some stress, give them some perceived adversity or hormesis, mitohormesis. So one way to do that is to exercise, okay? And you'll get free radicals, damage the mitochondria. They'll go, holy crap, I don't make enough energy. I was going to say money. I can tell what's on my mind.
You need both.
Yeah. They don't make enough energy, and then they multiply, and then you get younger, okay? The other thing you can do is, because you're running out of oxygen, those mitochondria get worried that there's not enough and they need to make more. But also having high barometric pressure oxygen, this HBOT, I think that it's working in part because it's also causing free radicals in mitochondria and making the mitochondria panic. So it's interesting, right? You can run out of oxygen by running, literally running, or have too much oxygen. And this, I think it's the same effect. It's those power packs of the cell getting worried that something's out of whack.
Okay.
And they adjust, and it's just like exercise. You get the benefits. And the same is true for all these other things that we do. If you're cold, that cold shock will boost your mitochondrial activity.
Okay. So this idea of these cold plunges everybody talks about, which I've been talking about for like 6 years, I didn't do it for that reason. I did it more for the discipline of it, the breathing, I'm going to do something difficult early in the morning. It's going to wake up my nervous system. Now I'm finding out that it's going to help me get into this hormesis state and potentially live a little bit longer. I got to ask you about this because it's just stuff, the topics that I keep reading about to keep coming back. AMPK. Okay. My understanding of it is it helps. It's active somehow in lipid metabolism somehow, right? Am I getting in the right area here?
It does both. Okay. Its main role is controlling sugar metabolism.
Okay, so sugar. So let's just step back a little bit because you talked about glucose monitor earlier, and I know that both my heart doctor, the people who are trying to get me to live longer, they're obsessed with my ability to metabolize glucose and that whole process in the body. And so why does what does glucose do to us? Why is it important that we metabolize it well or have less of it? Does that cause inflammation in the body overall, or are there other detrimental effects in the body from glucose?
Yeah, so having high blood sugar is just known to accelerate aging. There's no question about it.
But why, though?
Why?
Yeah, why?
So there's a couple of reasons. There's a very simple reason and a very practical explanation, which is that the glucose that circulates in your body can be used for fuel, but it can also inadvertently get attached to your proteins.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when you've got this glucose attached to proteins, they malfunction. So that's part of this buildup. That's why you want to have some intermittent fasting, restricted feeding, to turn over these glucuronidated proteins.
Okay.
And one of the ways to measure diabetes is to measure the glucose that's attached to your hemoglobin, which is an abundant protein in your red blood cells. And doctors take that measurement, it's called HbA1c, that tells you how much glucose you've had in your body roughly for the last month. Because hemoglobin lasts in the body for about 3 months and it's turned over. And that number gives you a good idea of whether you've been eating badly or you've got type 2 diabetes, which is the inability to utilize that blood sugar.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but or trending towards, correct?
Yeah.
That's is that not the big thing that most people that are going to go, that are having this monitor, they're not probably at type 2 yet, but they're trending in that direction if they don't do something about it.
For sure. And that's why it's important to measure it even when you're young.
Right.
You don't want it to be going up and up and up. By the time you're type 2 diabetic, it's often too late. And so I've been measuring mine for the last over a decade now.
I'll bet the vast majority of the people listening to this have never done that or do it once every 3 years in some random lab test that they do, right?
Yeah.
So
well, doctors don't pay a lot of attention to it until you're old or really obese, so you're starting to show signs of type 2 diabetes, which will accelerate your aging for sure.
Mm.
So that's one problem with glucose. It'll attach to proteins and make them malfunction, and it's a sign of type 2 diabetes. By the way, the numbers are based on the percentage of your hemoglobin that has glucose attached to it, stuck to it. Anything below 5% is really great. Between 5 and 7 is pre, and then roughly, and then over 7, then you got to be worried. Mm. And your doctor will start to treat it. And one of the drugs that's used, we'll talk about later, I think, is metformin. But what's also important, I think, is to understand that there's probably another mechanism to how this is working, because it's not just about blood sugar. By activating this AMPK you mentioned,
yes.
Actually, I got to take it a real quick step back, because there are 3 main things that keep us healthy when we feel hormesis or do hormesis. You've mentioned mTOR, which is sensing amino acids.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I work on are called sirtuins. They measure NAD and a whole bunch of stress in the body, exercise, diet. The one that we're talking about is the third one, which is called AMPK,
mm-hmm.
and it registers the amount of energy in the body, glucose and chemical energy, which is called ATP, that mitochondria make.
Yes.
Okay, and as we get older, our body makes less and less energy,
mm-hmm.
and AMPK is the control system. And AMPK is activated by a bunch of things, which include being hungry and exercising or taking the drug metformin. And that's probably why they're all good for you, because it turns on these defenses.
This is awesome. Okay, I'm getting it. All right.
And so think of your glucose as doing 2 things. One is sticking to proteins and wrecking the proteins, and you need to turn those over by fasting or eating less regularly. But also, if you always have sugar in your body, high levels, either diabetic or you're just eating cake every day,
yes,
or sugar in your coffee, what you're doing is telling the body there's an abundance right now, and your AMPK defenses are not turned on. Unless you take metformin, which might bypass that.
Yeah.
But what I try to do in my life is to turn on all of those 3 systems, the sirtuins with boosting NAD, AMPK by taking metformin and exercising, and then the mTOR, not taking an abundance of those 3 amino acids I mentioned, leucine,
mm-hmm.
isoleucine, valine. And together, I think they work as a system. We know they talk to each other.
Yeah.
And you tweak one, the other works. We don't know what the optimal combination is.
Yeah,
that
right.
I'm experimenting on myself as a
We're depending on you, brother. All of humanity is waiting on you here. So let's go. But I want to step back in here. If you're listening to this, you're learning a ton, for most of you. And for me, it's just stuff like, hey, I'm going to investigate this mTOR stuff a little bit more. I'm going to start to learn more about it if I was you. This AMPK, what is glucose doing in my body? Start to learn about these things. And then now we'll step back and get a little bit practical just for a second here. I want to ask you some specific things. So just detailed stuff. You mentioned earlier this idea of hyperbaric oxygen. I've had someone on the show who's this proponent of doing cardio with oxygen so getting oxygen under load, meaning that when you're taking his a big oxygen tank that I do it, and I take this oxygen under load. But one of the other things that he's a proponent of is following that, and there's a protocol before it as well, is red light therapy. I'm wondering if you've done any reading about red light therapy, any research on it, mm-hmm. and just straight up, what are your thoughts on red light? Because it's sort of like, I don't know if it's the new thing, but it's kind of like the new thing.
Right. Well, it's my job to stay up on these things, and even to try them myself.
Mm-hmm.
It brought a smile to my face when I was reading the science on the red light therapy.
Okay.
And the hyperbaric oxygen and the oxygen, high oxygen under training you do it?
Yeah, under load, just load. Okay. You're under stress.
Got it.
Yeah.
So they all point to mitochondria again.
Mm-hmm.
Even the red light. There are scientific papers that I could pull out that show that the red light at that wavelength is disrupting the ability of mitochondria to make energy. Mm-hmm. The way mitochondria make energy is that it's like a hot potato. They take electrons and they pass them along. Red light disrupts that, and then you have low energy, and your AMPK system detects low energy and starts to give you the health benefits because it's worried that you're going to run out of energy. So light, oxygen, hunger, simulating low energy, or in some cases actually is low energy.
Good. So I'm doing the right thing. So in English, in layman's terms, red light probably good.
Well, for sure. I mean, it's been shown to protect against hair loss and improve skin. So there's something to it. I tried shining some red light on some nematode worms to make them live longer. It didn't work, but that was a few years ago. I think there's a lot more data now that it's likely to be working similar to exercise and fasting, but through a light mechanism, which is actually easier
Sure
than
is.
these other things. And stimulating stem cells.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can buy a cap. You can get a cap that you put on your hair. I mean, you've probably seen on, not you, but most people
No, I
have
have.
seen.
I was losing my hair and I did it. And then I've also, I lay in a red light bed. They're very expensive, so it's not something everybody can do. You can go to a spa and do it yourself, and pay every time you go. But I have actually acquired one of those beds. So
Have you noticed that it
I
doesn't
have.
make
I'll be
a-
honest with you. I've noticed, well, I mean, everyone can judge. I've noticed a little bit of improvement in my skin, but I've noticed a difference in, I think the two things I've noticed for me, and they could be completely anecdotal, right? But I've noticed certainly an improvement in my skin, but I've noticed my sleep is better. And I would say that my overall ability to sustain energy has been better. And frankly, I have not gained weight, even though my diet deteriorated since I've begun. It's not something I'm proud to admit on the show, but I'm a pretty focused guy when it comes to what I eat and I put in my body. And I've went through a little window here the last 3 or 4 months where I just wasn't as diligent or vigilant about it. And I've not gained weight. And I don't know that any of that is connected to the two, but it's certainly something that I've experienced since I've been doing it.
Yeah. And how long do you spend in the light?
The cycles are usually 15 to 20 minutes, and I try to do it twice a day.
Oh,
And my
so
bed
that's
has
quite a
different
lot.
settings, one's for immunity, one can be for energy and things like that. And I just, it's one of those things as you're doing it, you're like, am I wasting my time here? Or is there some benefit to it? So I'm glad to hear that at least the studies say that there is.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, all right, let's talk about other things we can do that are beneficial. So we'll get to practical stuff people can do. First thing is that we talked about this the last time you were here, but telomeres has been sort of one of the newer age or was ways of measuring aging. And you sort of told me, nah, that's not it. You said my real age is younger than, or your actual age is younger than your real age. How are you measuring that? How is one measuring age now?
Well, a couple of ways.
Okay.
I've been working with a company, and in disclosure, I am an advisor to them.
Okay.
Inside Tracker. They came out of MIT, saw them about 12 years ago, joined their board. I'm not on there anymore, but have nurtured this company because I really believe in it. What they do is it's a blood test. You can have it done at your local LabCorp or Quest, or even have someone come to your kitchen, which is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it every 3 to 6 months, and it's a dashboard on my body. And then those 40 measurements of things that I mentioned, like HbA1c, there's other things like CRP for inflammation,
Okay.
of course, blood glucose levels, there's testosterone, vitamin levels. It's a compendium that's put into an algorithm that's based on how these things change over time with age for your sex and I guess your race and other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's back calculated to say, all right, compared to other humans on the planet, are you older or younger than them? The average male.
Mm-hmm.
So I have plotted myself for all of these parameters individually and as a compendium, as an algorithm for one score called the Inner Age 2.0 score.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I sit compared to other 52-year-olds
Mm-hmm.
that are white,
You're
Caucasian?
so young, yeah.
And I'm in the top. I'm better in terms of that number of than 98% of people my age.
Mm.
And that 2% bothers me. I'm very competitive, and I'm working to get it higher. I think there's 1 or 2 people out of thousands that they're better than me, but I did go off a statin just to check because I was losing my memory. But,
Yeah.
I am on a statin now,
Okay.
but I went off it and my cholesterol spiked. So
Your cholesterol did spike.
it did. I mean, I need a statin. It's in my genes.
Okay.
My father and my grandmother have had.
I'm on one as well.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say if you don't have any problems and if you can get it down with diet, do that, because there are effects on the brain.
And one of them is memory, correct?
Yeah.
One of the other things, too, is that your cholesterol can get too low. Your LDL can get too low, and that's not healthy for your brain either, correct?
That's really true.
Yeah.
And so, I'm
Cholesterol's
just
a
saying
good
why
thing.
it's
Yeah.
2%. I'm in the top 2%, not 1%.
Right.
Right. But anyway, that people are going to think I'm a little bit too competitive. But
Not at all.
I've plotted my blood biochemistry over the years against the average human and optimized each one.
Hmm.
And it's an experiment. It's long term. You can't just do it overnight.
Hmm.
But I think that's what modern medicine should be, is that we're constantly monitoring ourselves, not going to the doctor once a year for a checkup where they say, how do you feel? You sleeping? You feel like, okay, go home.
Mhm.
That's not medicine.
Yeah.
That's therapy.
Yep.
Now, medicine is, and the future of medicine, and for some people who want to invest in this and put in their time and money, you can get devices to read your body continuously. We've
Mhm.
talked about continuous glucose monitors in our arm, but there are rings, right? I've got this
I've
Aura
got the ring, too.
You've
I'm just
got
not
that
wearing
too.
it today. I've got the
Yeah.
Aura ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bio button. brought one today in case this came up. I'm holding up a little gray squarish device that is maybe a quarter of an inch thick that I stick on my chest usually, and it measures my heart, my vibrations, my movement. And this thing can tell you if you're going to have a heart attack next week. Kind of important.
Yes.
But other things, it can even tell you if you have a cold or a flu, or whether you need antibiotics or not. And this is the future. I raised this actually as an example of the way medicine should be, which is you are monitored not once a year, but 1,000 times a second.
Wow.
And when that's going to be ubiquitous, then the old way of doing medicine is going to seem medieval.
It's so true. And, guys, I'm fortunate enough that I have that as well. And it's things like, why do you want things monitored? Because the truth is most cancers caught early are very treatable. It's catching them late that's a problem. Heart disease caught early is treatable, like we've talked about with statins or anything like that. And I'm not making any medical recommendations, nor am I a doctor, nor am I even close to that. And that's why I want to ask you some medical stuff now, because I know that you don't feel good about a couple of the things that I do, and I want to ask you about why. So let's talk about things that we can do. So you talked a minute ago about hormone levels. And so I have been on, and I know what you're going to say, but I want you to explain your point of view on this to the audience. Full transparency, the audience knows this. I've been on testosterone, some form of testosterone replacement therapy. My gosh, it's got to be 10 or 15 years. And I know that testosterone, at least in my case, negatively, we're getting real detailed here, but it can negatively impact HDL, for example. It can suppress HDL, which mine is already genetically pretty low. So there's a danger, HDL being your good cholesterol. I know that that's a negative to me taking the testosterone. Having said that, I watch friends of mine that I know that are in their 70s that have been males that have been on testosterone therapy for, say, 20 years. And I compare that visually to somebody like my father who passed away last year. And visually, externally, these guys that were on testosterone look 20 years younger than my dad did. And so this, I'm not arguing with you about, I want to understand it. That's why the first thing I asked you today is, if you visually look younger, are you likely to be internally younger? Because visually, if you take somebody like a very well-known actor that most people know who's been open about taking testosterone, who's a friend of mine, who makes a lot of like boxing movies and stuff, right? And so you compare him to my father, who is about the same age, and visually they really looked like different species almost at that age. So what are your thoughts about hormone replacement? And if you're not for it, which I think you probably aren't, specifically why?
Well, I'm all for keeping your hormones at young levels.
Okay.
I'm all about keeping the body the way it was when it was 20. And however you can do that and it's safe, do that.
Okay.
So I'm on board with hormone replacement therapy for women and men if needed.
Okay. But you think maybe not needed. I'm interrupting you.
That's the point that I have tried my best to find ways in myself to.
So you're 52. You're in that 300 to 700 range of testosterone in your body. You're saying right now your hormone levels are that normal in your 50s without any.
I'm actually naturally higher than an average 20-year-old, but naturally meaning I've worked at it. I've changed things in my diet. I've done things and it's gone.
What are some of those things?
Well, exercise helped building up. I'm not as bulky as you, that's for sure. But from my basal state, which was pretty puny, to having some muscle, my quads mainly, big muscles, back muscles as well, doing deadlifts, this kind of stuff. So that helped a lot. Got it up to hovering around 500.
Okay.
It's gone close to double that over the last couple of years with changes to my diet. with supplements, but I can't tell you scientifically which one of those has contributed, but it's steadily gone up, which is good. If it had plummeted, I would have stopped taking X, whatever it was.
Okay.
But I'm happy with these numbers, so it's just under or near 1,000 now.
My God, that's amazing.
Okay. It's shocking actually, because I haven't done anything obvious. You know, you read online what boosts testosterone. I'm not doing a lot of that stuff. So I guess I'm lucky that way.
So that was one of the genetic good hands you were dealt compared to some of the other stuff that wasn't so favorable. That's because that's unbelievably high for 52 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, you know, I want to be helpful practically. So some of the things that I do so this fasting has helped. I think that when I started, well, I don't call it fasting, eating once a day, one meal a day.
I got you calling it fasting now.
Yeah, that's okay. People know what that is. OMAT is the other way to do it, to call it one meal a day. But that seemed to help. And so also giving up a lot of fat and a lot of meat. Now, that's not going to sound good to everybody, I know. I
want them to know.
Yeah, but I think that's helped. And I did lose weight, and that may have contributed to, right? I mentioned how much weight I've lost. But here's the thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to supplement at all. I'm not against it. I think what you're doing is perfectly acceptable.
But I heard you say... something about burning the candle at both ends. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So it's an abundant signal. Testosterone is, times are good, build muscle. But then I have to look at the clinical data. And while it won't extend your lifespan, and that's really clear, there have been probably $50 million worth of clinical trials saying that testosterone won't make you live longer. It will help you have more muscle, which will prevent you falling over and breaking your bones, which is a problem for most elderly. So that's good. But there's also not a lot of downside.